Question 2. Study figure 5, a table showing the results of a survey of life satisfaction for a number of European countries 2011. Life satisfaction is how happy people are with their quality of life. We've got a score from 0, which is the lowest possible score, to 10, the highest possible. So a list of countries and their scores next to it. So question 2.1, got to calculate the median value for life satisfaction data in the figure. So think back to maths, we're trying to find the average, but this one is the median. So basically you've got to find the middle number. So it says show your working here. So what you need to do is you need to put the countries in order, probably going from the smallest to the biggest, and you choose the middle number. So the middle number will be 6.9. Question number 2, suggest one reason why life satisfaction scores vary between countries. So why is it that some have big numbers? Why is it that some have little? So in terms of the pattern, it looks like, generally speaking, the more developed the country, the more money a country has, the more that people are happy with life. So you could link the idea and try and use some figures. Germany, for instance, 7.2. Germany have a lot of money, so they can buy material goods with their disposable income. Maybe you could say in these more developed countries like the UK, for instance, the government provide good quality social care. It could be better access to jobs. So any sort of quite general statement like that should be enough to get the 1 mark needed. Finally, 2.3, give one disadvantage of using a social measure of development such as life satisfaction. So this is a very sort of common question to sort of evaluate a way in which we can measure how developed a country is. So because we've used this idea of life satisfaction, looking at the mark scheme, they'll accept answers such as this information is not as reliable as other ways of looking at how developed a country is, such as we could look at GDP or GNI, basically just harder data. We can look at how much a country actually earns, and we can have a value to that. This is just someone's opinion, and obviously their opinions could be swayed by many different things, or if they've just got a scale from 0 to 10, a lot of people might just decide to go in the middle. So it's not quite as accurate as hard data looking at maybe things like the economy and money. Question 2.4. Using figure 6 and your own understanding, explain the link between the DTM, the demographic transition model, and a country's level of development. So we've got a version of the DTM for your figure. You've basically got the stages that a country goes through at the top over time. And then you've also got this diagonal line, which is income. So sort of stage 1, stage 2, you've got your poor countries, your LIC. Now, a lot of these people in these countries live in rural areas or the countryside, and they're going to be predominantly farmers. So we could say that because income is still very low, a lot of people will have big families. The birth rate is still going to be very high because they need lots of people to help them work on these primary jobs. There could be diseases which unfortunately kill some of their children, so infant mortality will be high, so they need to compensate. There is a lack of education as well. So that's stage 2. Stage 3, well, this is our newly emerging economies, countries like China and India, sort of in this stage. This is where the countries are rapidly industrializing. There's loads of factories here now. As a result, people that were farmers are now migrating and moving towards the cities. That's what this term is here. They're there because ideally they want a better quality of life, mainly because there is the idea that there's going to be a greater variety of jobs, and these jobs are going to be better paid. So moving towards the city, they don't necessarily need to have as big a families now to do the farming work that they had traditionally done. Also, healthcare is improving as well, and things like contraception are becoming more readily available to them. Finally, stages 4 and 5, this is where we have high income countries. So the income is high. So as a result, a lot of people live into their 70s and 80s. Very few people die. The death rate is very low. As a result, particularly the role of women in society, they're more empowered not to just be people that stay at home to look after children, but to be more empowered, particularly to get a career. So people are getting married later, and as a result, the birth rate is quite low in these countries. Figure 7, which describes the effect of a microfinance project in Ghana, a country in Africa. So we've got a box full of text. And the question 2.5, 2 marks, says using the figure, state 2 challenges faced by people of the area. So a very easy question, to be honest. I'd be surprised if there was something as easy as this in your final exam. What we've got to do is pick out 2 bad things, 2 challenges that are faced by the people in Ghana. So if you have a read of it, you've got the fact that crops were failing. You've got the fact there is often a dry season, probably in the summer. You've got the fact that children had very little to eat, so they often became extremely malnourished or had a poor diet. Or finally, as a result, there's very high mortality rate. So any of those 2 put here for 2 marks. 2.6 suggests one way microfinance loans can help to reduce the development gap. So just to be clear, microfinance loans is a loan of a small amount of money. Now, you can say that's good because if you give someone too much money and they can't pay it back, that is where they get into things like debt. If they can't pay it back, they'll just have loads and loads of interest to pay, which would not be good. You could suggest that the fact it is not aid given to them, it's not basically a free handout, it is a loan. These farmers do get a sense of empowerment. Just looking at the mark scheme, that could be a potential answer. Or finally, you could say that these farmers who are called subsistence farmers, that basically just normally eat what they grow, but if you give them a bit more money so they can have maybe slightly better fertilizer, or maybe 1 or 2 more people to help them out in the fields, they can sort of escape that cycle of poverty. So they just give them enough to sort of sell to others. And as it says in the text, you've got the word surplus as well. So it's just enough just to kickstart them, to get them out of that cycle of poverty. So any one of those reasons will be plenty for that 1 mark. 2.7, outline one way the political or trading relationship of a named LIC or NEE country with the wider world has changed. So our named country is Nigeria. So from 1650 up until the mid-20th century, Nigeria was a part of the British Empire. So they sold a lot of goods to Britain, for example, palm oil, and bought in and imported machinery from Britain. Ever since 1960, when they've got their independence, they now trade with lots of other countries, for instance, China. So China supply Nigeria with weapons, they train up their armed forces, for instance, they set up a satellite and gave money for a new railway line for bullet trains. In return, Nigeria basically sell China lots and lots of oil and also have to buy lots of cheap Chinese textiles and clothes. So something like that, as long as your points are developed, should be enough for the 2 marks. Using a case study of an LIC or NEE country, explain how manufacturing industry can encourage economic development. So again, we've got to use Nigeria, that's our country. Basically, the question is wanting you to explain how mainly factory work can help give more money to a country. So first of all, we can talk about Africa's richest person, Aliko Dangote. Now, he's a multi-billionaire and a founder of a huge cement company. So you can say, well, this person has provided lots of jobs in the area, and then you can talk about how people have more money so they can spend it on loads of different things for themselves or their family. So you could introduce the multiplier effect. Say not only have they got richer, but they're spending their money and encouraging other businesses to also increase in wealth. You can also say that the government, if jobs are created, will get more tax, and then the tax can be used to improve things like infrastructure, roads and railway lines, etc. This may well encourage more factories, more manufacturing jobs to become available. Because if you've improved things like the road network or the railway, TMC might want to put its factory in your country, because then it's once the goods are made, it's really easy for them to be transported and sold either elsewhere in the country or in other countries. And then finally, it's not clear from the mark scheme, but I think it'll be fine to talk about the oil industry as well. I think as long as you can try and say the oil is not just taken out of the ground, but maybe it is refined, it is turned into things maybe like petrol. I think we can sort of argue this can happen in Nigeria as well. And then it's all the idea again of providing jobs. Shell, for instance, a big TNC, they provided over $1 billion to the Nigerian government in 2006, just purely through tax. So ideas like that, you can try and develop your points. A couple of specific facts should get you close to 6 marks. 9. Using figure 8, calculate the mean growth rate in the 10 towns with the lowest growth in new businesses from 2004 to 2013. So the mean is where you've got to add everything up and divide by how many there are, which we know already in the question is 10. So if we look at the figure, you've got an outline map of the UK and loads of different cities labelled. Now you've also got two colours. One is green, which shows the cities where loads of new businesses have been created, but the question just wants us to work on the places where very few new businesses have come. So what we've got to do, we've got to add up all of these figures. So minus 5.5, minus 5.3, 1.3, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 4.2, 4.7, 5, 5.0. Add all those numbers up, divide by 10, and your answer, just putting at the bottom here, should be 1.95%. Question 2.10. Suggest how one or more strategies might reduce regional differences in the UK. So, the UK can generally be split into two sections. You've got the rich, wealthy south and the poor north. So the question is basically asking what can be done to reduce the gap between the two. Now, you could briefly just have a few facts just to set the scene to say in the north of England, the amount of disposable income people have a year is around £13,000, whereas down in London it's around 19,000. Or you could say on average, the people in the north of England live around about 2 years less than the people in the south. Now, the main part of the question will be focusing on the strategy. There's loads of different ones. The first one is something called enterprise zones. This is basically just areas where if you build an office or a factory, you're not going to have to pay much business or corporation tax, so you'll get more profit. If you do want to expand, it's going to be relatively easy to do so without having to go through lots of different agencies and sign lots of forms. The infrastructure, the road and railway lines around these areas will be improved in case you want to transport any goods. Now, a lot of these areas are going to be put in the north of England to hopefully encourage businesses, either UK or from abroad, to locate further up, to give people more jobs, give them more money, and all the knock-on effects to improve their quality of life. There's another idea called Northern Powerhouse. This is basically what the government are trying to do is almost create a mini London up in Manchester. And the idea being that the key term is they're trying to devolve or get rid of power and allow people in the north of England to make decisions for their local area. Because at the moment, a lot of the decisions about where money is spent in the country is down in the government in London. But if they can devolve power to people in Manchester, and get them to be in charge of millions of pounds. And because these people are local to the area, they are hopefully more able to identify where the money needs to be spent on roads, or which small businesses they would like to finance, or which schools they would like to improve, rather than making the decision from people in London who maybe have never been to the north of England. Finally, could talk about the improvements in transport. For instance, the high-speed rail link from London to Birmingham, and then potentially Birmingham connecting to Manchester or in Scotland. This is called high-speed rail, or HS2. The idea being that if it is quicker to get down to London from places like Birmingham or Manchester, then businesses are more likely to locate in the north of England, just because if they ever do need to get down to London, it's really quick to do so. So you could talk about that as an idea. To get sort of top marks, there needs to be a little bit of an evaluation. So you could say, well, actually, in reality, by making the journey quicker from the north of England down to London, instead of getting companies moving out of London, you might just get lots of workers, lots of people going to the capital, just because it is quicker to do so, which would, again, sort of highlight the fact that the north will get poorer and poorer. There'll be a brain drain of of a lot of young, talented people, and they'll be all concentrated in the capital. So if there is a bit of balance in that question, then that is how you sort of access the level 3 marks of 7, 8, or 9.